here's the part I find amusing, but it's kind of embarrassing, Pauline, that people would argue this. And those that argued it might indicate to you who's behind all of this elitist Aboriginal ideology, this rainbow corporation people ideology. And it's kind of embarrassing because you can easily Google this stuff if you know how to use the Googles. Maybe you can ask the AI. It might show you one day. This one thing, this one singular thing has seemed to cause a hatred. And not from the people, Pauline, from the state, from the police, from magistrates' courts, from those corrective services, from those forensic mental healths. Right? And it might have something to do with this. Because what were we when we were younger? Little boys. I mean, our Anzac flew this into battle and 62,000 men died. And your police officers disrespect it. Your police officers disrespect it. They actually attack it like it's a foreign enemy at war. That's kind of interesting, Pauline, how they tiptoe around all of the background to this. And why do those magistrates scared of this? Why do they chuck tanties and why do they need fixated persons in the actual police to try and stop anybody questioning what a person is? Fixated on those persons, aren't they? Those state protection squads. They've got a whole unit to be fixated on. You know, they pick the fixated types and they put them before a Facebook computer and say, be fixated on this computer. But this is in Google. I mean, you can easily see images of Anzac flying this and people demonstrating this and government documents demonstrating it, and it seems to be the biggest threat of all of them. Interesting that, isn't it, Pauline? That your Anzac have this lineage and no one knows what's going on. Now you listen here! Listen to what? What am I listening to? Please explain, Pauline. Please explain. Red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. Whose red flags? Now you listen here. Please explain, Pauline. I would really like you to explain why under the United Nations this is allowed to occur. And the referendum and the mockery and all that stuff, when this was clearly established in July 2020. That's clear as day. It's on the courtroom record, the Supreme Court of New South Wales courtroom record, Pauline. And there's a lineage there that goes back to Anzac. That goes back to before all of you and your stupid referendum ideals and the shadow men behind Albo. The shadow men behind Albo. The shadow men that were behind Scummo. The shadow men behind Greenie. Who acts like that? Communists do. Eugenicists do. Right, and then who acts on the other side of the fence? Slave traders do. What do we do with all the wards of the state? The children that you manage. What shall you do with all of them? The age of entitlement is over, Frydenberg said. Do you remember all these things, Pauline? Do you remember the language that they used? Treating everyone like little children, and then everyone ran out of money and they treated like, oh, we need to digitise all the little children. We need to take them out of reality and put them in this fake little digital world we're going to sell to them. And then we're going to use our police to enforce it upon them. with a driver's license, Pauline. With a driver's license, Pauline, so that we can come and take cars off people when they've done nothing wrong, because the AI is taking over, isn't it, Pauline? The AI is taking over. Red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. Social credit score. Oh, you can't buy that piece of meat. Too many carbon credits, and your social credit score's not good enough. You haven't been a good child. No, not being a good child for the state, Pauline. Not being a good child for the state. For the state, Pauline. Right, it's called extortion, Pauline. It's called extortion, Pauline. It's called a war crime. It's called fraud. It's called deception. Deceiving these people into being defrauded. Into being defrauded, Pauline. That's a deception, right? And then anybody that would believe your bullshit would be deluded, wouldn't they, Pauline? Like on the Supreme Court of New South Wales courtroom record. It's not a delusion to believe this stuff. There is a curial right in the matter. It's not a delusion. That would make what you do very heinous and sick. Very heinous and sick, Pauline. While you count on all the ignorant and asleep and not awake and blind, Pauline. You count on them. That's sick. That's pretty evil stuff, Pauline. Pretty evil stuff. And now it's being pointed out, isn't it, Pauline? What is this digital ID? Is it actual slavery? And what happens when the people realise and revolt? No one condones violence, but you're walking yourselves into a literal world war in your own ignorance of following these money men, these eugenicists, these slave traders. You're following them instead of the word of God, right? Which I have here too. Just like Trump warned you. Anchor or sink. And you're failing to anchor, and the only opportunity for all of you is to sink. That's a problem, Pauline. When you've blindly defrauded the people out there in a deception. An inception, a deception, right? And you face the veil of Siddim because you can't read the landscape. That's pretty sad. Well, you sent all of the military hardware that could have defended this country over to the Ukraine. You could have given it to the men in the towns that defend their towns. But instead, you treat them like lepers. Red flag, red flag, red flag. Be a good citizen. Work the machine. Be a good taxpayer. Stay poor. As soon as you are becoming anything of value, we'll send the police in to challenge things. Why does that happen, Pauline? You're keeping the poor poor. You're keeping the poor poor. Oh, surely that's a criminal offence. Using the state to keep the poor poor. That working class that constantly has to borrow from you, that pays that tax. So the cycle continues, so that your elite money masters in the Federal Executive Council can act like they own what belongs to God. What belongs to God, Pauline? And then treat God's people like slaves on your prison vessels where you sell their sweat labour to foreign interests.